Good morning, dear students. How are you? You must be doing fine at home. At the same time, waiting for the school to reopen and reach the classroom, meet your friends and teachers. But unfortunately, we are here in a virtual world doing our lessons. Today, I am going to take a lesson for you from your detailed textbook, Hornbill. The name of the lesson is The Portrait of a Lady. You know, before taking the lesson, let me ask you one thing. During this lockdown period, you must have had a wonderful time with your parents. You must have got a lot of time to interact with your parents, your brothers, sisters, cousins, above all, your grandmother and grandfather, for whom you don't get time during school hours. But now, in the lockdown period, you must have had ample of time to discuss lot of things with your grandparents. Because the lesson that I am going to take today is related to grandmother and a grandchild. Okay? The name of the lesson is The Portrait of the Lady by Khushwant Singh. Khushwant Singh was a lawyer, he was a novelist, a journalist and an editor of many newspapers. Okay, dear children, in this lesson, he has described his journey with his grandmother right from his childhood till his higher studies. You know, grandmothers, they're full of knowledge. They have many tales to tell you. And when they start telling tales, you get mesmerized. You wonder, was the world like that? Was things like that? Was she really that wonderful and pretty? Because when you see your grandmother, she's wrinkled, she's bent, she walks with a bent back, taking the help of a walking stick. But even she was young like you, once upon a time. Here the lady is none other than Khushwant Singh's grandmother. He describes her. He describes her beauty. He describes the way of life she led. She describes the tales that she enjoyed during her childhood, a time with her husband. Okay? So, let me tell you, Khushwant Singh starts telling everything about his grandmother in a very beautiful way. He has always seen her with wrinkled face. You know what are wrinkles? When the skin goes in layers. Right, children? So when we grow old, when you grow old, we'll also have the same wrinkles. But wrinkles are not to do anything with age, if I would like to say, because that's part of our life and we should take it very graciously and in a very beautiful manner. That's what Khushwant Singh's grandmother also did. Khushwant Singh described her as a beautiful landscape of the winter season. That means she was very pretty, she was very calm, very peaceful, and she took everything very gracefully. And then he described how he spent his life with her in the village. He was a born Indian, of course, he was from Punjab, and in Punjab you can well understand it's a land of greenery, a land of fields. Khushwant Singh trotted to his school with his grandmother holding a wrinkled hand. And you know, where was the school? His school was in the temple. The temple courtyard was his classroom. He had a wonderful time over there. Meanwhile, his grandmother sat in the temple, read some spiritual textbooks, and she waited for Khushwant to finish his classroom and join her. And that was a wonderful moment for the bond between the grandmother and the grandson. They enjoyed walking back home. And you know, while walking back, the grandmother, she used to feed the stray dogs. The stray dogs waited for her. She used to bring the leftover food and she used to give it to the dogs on the way. Fine, children? And Khushwant Singh had a wonderful childhood with his grandmother in the village. Then, you know, things changed. His parents, who were in the city, had to call grandmother and Khushwant Singh to city. They did not know that they are going to miss the life in village. In city, you all know the life in city is totally different from village. City doesn't have greenery, people don't have time for one another, and you don't have schools in the temple. You have to go to a separate building to have your learning. Right, children? So even Khushwant Singh had the same problem. He came to city, he went to a school building, and then his grandmother could not accompany him. That was the first drawback that the grandmother felt when they came back to city. But the pretty old lady, she did not get dejected. She took the things very graciously and went on with her life. She did not get much time to talk to her grandson. Even the grandson, Khushwant Singh, he did not have time to discuss with her. Whereas when he was in village, all his time was for his grandmother because he slept with her, he got up with her, he had food with her, he went to school with her. But in city, oh no, that was not the life for him. In city, it was totally different. And grandma, poor little grandma, there was nobody to talk to her. The mother, she was busy somewhere. The father, he was busy somewhere. And Khushwant himself was busy in his school and school learning. And whenever he narrated whatever happened in the school, the grandmother did not like it. There was nothing related to God. And the music that was taught in the school, oh my God, the grandmother simply hated it. She called it, "What kind of music is being taught in your school? There is nothing related to God in that." But poor Khushwant, what could he do? He had to do whatever was done in the classroom. The journey in the city began with the grandmother having her own time and Khushwant having his own time. Well, it was taken very wonderfully. Both grandmother and grandson, they had separate rooms. They could not sleep together. They had a very huge bungalow where the grandmother was in one room, the grandson in the other room, and they interacted for a very short period of time. But well, that was the life in city. Then a time came when Khushwant had to go for higher education. It was a time there was going to be a long gap between their meeting. He went abroad for 5 long years. And that 5 long years, nobody knew how the grandmother was spending her time. Neither Khushwant had time to interact with her. There was no such system where he could talk to her. Today we are having mobiles, we are having WhatsApp, but in those days, no, nothing of such things, right? But the grandmother was waiting for her grandson to come. Yes, children, shall we continue with the lesson? Isn't it interesting? You too must be having a wonderful time with your grandmother, and grandmother must be telling you a lot of stories that she must have had in her past, what she did in her childhood and how her childhood was. And here poor little grandmother, very sad, she was all alone, and you know what she did? She befriended the sparrows. She befriended the birds in her courtyard, and she took to feeding them. Back in village, whom did she feed? She fed the stray dogs. But here in the city, she found the sparrows to be her friend. The moment the sparrows heard her footsteps, gathered in the veranda for the morsel that she was going to feed them. And every afternoon, she spent her time feeding the sparrows. And rest of the time, she used to sit and pray because nobody had time for her. Dear children, listen one thing. Whenever you get time, you should give time for your grandmother and grandfather. They are treasures for you. They have a lot of things to tell you. So never ignore them. They need your love. They don't need wealth. They need your love and care. That's what we should give them also. It is a lesson for each one of us. It's me or you. Grandparents are a treasure. Right, children? And you should learn to respect and believe them, trust them. And whatever they tell you, you should take it to your good being, well-being. Okay, dear children? Now let me continue with the story. And the 5 long years finally came to an end. And grandmother was also happy, though she did not say that in words. The grandmother was very happy now because after 5 long years, her grandson was coming back to the land. And she gathered the ladies of her neighborhood, the few ladies of her own age group, and she started singing and dancing, because she was very much happy, very happy. When somebody comes to your home after a long gap, you feel very excited, you are very eager to meet them. So was the case with grandma. And Kushwant, he was also very happy. And the first thing he did was that he gave her a very loving hug. And that hug, that hug was telling everything. No words were spoken. But that hug said that they were physically apart, but the love, the care for each other was stronger than what it was 5 years back. And then that day went very peacefully. But all of a sudden, the next morning, the grandmother fell ill. And she knew that her end was nearing. She refused to eat anything. And family members, they were very much worried. And she wanted to be left alone. She started chanting her prayers. She had the rosary in her hand and she went on praying. And she slept into a deep slumber, a peaceful slumber forever. And along with the family members, who were the others who mourned her death, the sparrows, there were a lot of sparrows sitting on the tree branches, sitting in the veranda. They sat up to her dead body and they mourned her death. She had a very peaceful end. And that was the end of Kushwant Singh's life with his grandmother. The next morning, when Kushwant's mother came to the veranda, she saw the morsel of food all scattered over there. The sparrows had not taken a single morsel. That showed how much the sparrows too loved her. That was the end of a journey of Kushwant Singh's relationship with his grandmother. Thank you, my dear children.